And I would like to give the floor to our moderator. He is the head of the AR/VR Development Director, Alexey Kolenchuk. Thank you for the introduction. Dear friends, we'll talk about AR/VR, and also we would like to talk about the processes that we have today. Dear friends, what I would like to add, well, now it's obvious that we now live in the virtual reality. Yes, some of them we want to resist, but we spend so much time with our phones. We spend 6 hours per day with our phones. Today we have our sessions with online formats, and sure, this is our new reality, and this year we are facing COVID-19. And it's not about people who work with VR and AR. All the businesses are now affected. So how COVID-19 affected business, and what do we expect for the future? And what do we need in terms of technology? We have amazing speakers today. I would like to introduce them before we start. We have Charlie Fink, our guest from another part of the world. Charlie is an expert in XR technologies. We also have Andrei Debitko. He's the founder and CEO of SketchR. We have Ekaterina Filatova. She is with us here today. Also, she is the head of Association AR/VR, the association which is called Avra. We have Vladimir Stishkin. He is from business. He is the head of AR/VR at Gazprom Neft. Vladimir, are you with us here? Yes? Well, you can correct me if I'm wrong, telling about your position at the company. We have Alexander Likichov. Well, he's probably just finished filming. He's an expert in VR and AR. He's one of the consultants. He supports different projects, and he will talk about it later. We also have Vitaly Stepanov. He's the Chief of Development Innovation at Varmin in Russia. Correct me if I'm wrong. Vitaly is one of the main business developers in Russia. If we talk about AR and VR, he offered multiple solutions. And my name is Alexey Kolenchuk. I'm development director in AR/VR at Skolkovo Foundation. I help different businesses and startups. I connect startups with business. We will follow our Russian tradition. We'll give the first floor so we'll give the floor to our international expert. That's why I would like to ask our expert, Charlie Fink. Charlie, are you with us? Can you hear me?
Yes, Alexei, I can hear you. Thank you for having me this morning.
Well, can you please tell us the trends that we have on the global level? Do you see any changes in people's behavior? And what is relevant today in the United States, for example, and in the global market?
If I were having this conversation with you a year ago, I would have said one of the biggest obstacles to the development of VR technology was that there was no easily apprehensible consumer value proposition, that people didn't really know what it was for other than it being a game machine. And if I had explained the killer application of VR technology, I would have said, well, it's presence, the ability to be present in places that you can't be physically. And of course, most people put no value in presence. People had an abundance of presence. You were present wherever you are or wherever you wanted to be. But of course, the world has changed quite a bit in the past year. And now when I say presence, people lean into that because we have a scarcity of presence. What was once abundant, like air, is something that we all now need. And so the notion of a device that provides you with presence in other places where we cannot be physically suddenly has obvious and profound applications, both for leisure and business and education. And of course, remote training, which has become a very big topic, especially among at least US companies that are very, very concerned about knowledge capture and transfer, particularly in an environment where we need to be together, but we have to stay apart.
Charlie, спасибо.
Charlie, thank you. Well, it's really relevant when we talk about global markets, or they write about something different when we talk about media, for example. There is an opinion that COVID-19 didn't give this impetus to VR development. Yes, we have conditions for the development, but we don't see these breakthroughs.
You know, there's a famous saying in the US, which is you go to war with the army that you have, not the army that you want to have. So I agree with the proposition that VR isn't quite ready for prime time, so to speak. That is, there aren't enough headsets. The headsets that do exist aren't good enough. And of course, the content itself is in its earliest stages of development. For example, somebody mentioned education. Why isn't it, progressing faster in education? Well, there are two reasons, right? One is that people don't yet have headsets for personal use. Certainly, it's not like the school hands out smartphones and to students or computers. So yet computers are fundamental to education. People have them in the home now. That was the trajectory of the development of the personal computer, and that took 25 years. The first Apple computers were introduced to the time that they were in most households. So I have contended, and I continue to believe, that the development pattern of XR technology, specifically VR, but also wearable AR head-mounted displays for consumers, are following the development pattern of the personal computer. In which case, 10 years from now, when it arrives and it's ubiquitous, it will be right on time, in my estimation.
Well, thank you, dear colleagues. We have our session in the format. We have comments and questions. Well, all our speakers know that you can write your questions in our chat, so you can react to these questions. And I would like to ask about education. So, Vitaly, can you provide your comments? And Alexander, how do you view the development of these technologies in education? And when we talk about global agenda, what is different? Alexander, are you here?
Наверное, сначала взрослый и мудрый отвечай, да, по правилам нас.
Alexander, can you start? Yes, I will start. When we see these trends, the way AR is implemented in education, it started a long time ago. And a peak, probably we see it this year, but COVID-19 has changed the situation because we need to understand the way headsets are used, the way technologies are used. Well, usually these are offline solutions, and these solutions are in different educational centers. So now it's different. For example, you then have these headsets at home. Usually they are in these schools. Well, you have your laptops, but it's not enough for this. This is a stop factor because we were not ready that COVID-19 will be a barrier for this development. But if we talk about contact and different educational solutions that can be used in this sphere. So, for example, we can see our Chinese colleagues, for example, RTC education, and it is quite successful in China. And these technologies, they allow us to save resources, and they can be widely used. We can use 5G networks for this, we can transfer data, so it is very promising. We think that COVID-19 will teach us how to react to such stop factors which are blocking the development, and we can adapt, and we can be even more prepared later, and it can be a new impetus. So we can have these headsets at home later, and later it will be considered as something which is important and not just something for games. So these headsets can be useful for different purposes. Vitaly, can you add something? Well, it is really difficult to add something, but I would like to note that this situation showed us that we don't have enough content. Yes, we had something, people wanted to use some of the platforms, but now it is different. We have lack of content, and it is visible. We have technologies that can be used, but we need to develop this. And people at school, they can create their content for themselves. And now when we have this remote studying, now we have teachers and they need to be more adaptive, and now they have more trust towards VR and AR instruments. Vitaly, I would like to summarize. Sure, there is a problem. It is really difficult to say that households, they have lots of tools. Now lots of pupils, they have remote educational programs, but unfortunately they don't use VR. And again, when we talk about content, unfortunately we don't have enough. Charlie, how do you view it? How can we solve these issues?
I think you see, various universities and different programs starting to create curriculum for VR. So right now, again, as I said, very few people have headsets. In situations where there are headsets, the curriculum is improvised by the instructor, who might take their students on virtual field trips or to various sites that are what they might be studying. But there are not well-developed curricula so that you can say, well, I'm a high school math teacher and here's what I can do in VR. The high school math teacher today has to make that up themselves, and they have to do it in an environment where it's not that all the pupils will have equal access to the technology. It's very, very early going. It's funny, medicine and education are areas with highly technically literate practitioners and professionals, but they are the most difficult institutionally to deploy new technology in, at least in the United States. Of course, the obstacle is who pays for it, right? And on the education side, again, it has to be democratized and equally available to all the students. And I think we were talking a little bit as we were preparing for the panel about the challenges now because of the pandemic of sharing equipment in an environment like a computer lab, right? How do you keep it hygienic? How do you clean it between uses? How long is it safe? How long should a headset, be isolated after one person uses it? So these are going to be new obstacles to deploying the technology in schools, and honestly, in clinical medical situations as well.
Charlie, yes, thank you. It's true. I would like to add that now, when we talk about virtual reality in education, while we're starting discussing it, it's like we had these first computer classes in Russia. Because it was not available for everyone, and we didn't have enough literacy. And now we can see that it is available for all of people. But when we talk about our next speaker, it is true that everyone has smartphone now. And lots of people, they have access to AR. They can use their mobile phones, they can use these tools.
Among our speakers, there is someone who had a long story with the different devices, and he will tell you what devices he had a story with. This is an artist who made a startup. For me, this combination is already amazing for us. Andrei, will AR become a solution or a driver for these problems that we see with virtual reality? Everyone wants, but do you see barriers? Will this allow to popularize the technology? Hello, Alexei. I welcome all participants of the forum. The effect of the pandemic could be split into two components. First, what effect do we see now in terms of products? All entertainment projects became more popular. People are looking for things to do after they have watched all the movies. Also, our mobile application increased threefold. But most importantly is that these users, they leave because basically they were looking for some entertainment. And we realized that the beginning stage of the development of the whole industry, and it's hard to get the attention of all users by VR or AR, but nonetheless, such interest toward the product is always good. And second, I would say about what this will give us in the future. The strategy that each of us, each of developers is thinking about is what we need to achieve. Please let me show you on the slides what I'm talking about. And this will tell you why this is important for us. These last few months of pandemic made a discovery for us. Last year, we were making a list of recommendations that would allow to develop creativity. And what data did we use? The quality of painted content, how much it matches the original that we show to the user, and we also assess the hand position. So during pandemic, we got a lot of data that in a regular situation it would take us 1 year to get. And also thanks to one European producer of the art material, we realized that the technologies that we have developed can be potentially used in predicting of certain disabilities of children. So, talking about what pandemic did for us, we assessed it as a preliminary stage for collection of useful information, of useful components that will help us to do the final product when there will be glasses of virtual reality that everyone will be wearing on a daily basis. And to sum up, pandemic is a good step to develop and to understand where to go next to and where we're heading to. And I think that this pandemic was a good thing from viewpoint of development of VR and AR industry, and even of artificial intelligence. Andrei, obviously you're one of beneficiaries of the pandemic, because your application, the popularity of your application increased. The application that teaches drawing, where you can hold your mobile device with one hand and make a sketch with the other hand, and the application helps to make it prettier. Plus, there are ideas of social usefulness, of health monitoring. What do you think about it? So here is some educational application. Well, okay, we see people are in the pandemic. So do you think it's here for long to stay? Because now people have more time. I need to do something before my holiday. Or do you think there are alternative scenarios? So what do you think about it? Is it here to stay, or is it just for this moment? I think this is the interest. The interest to this application is not here to stay for long. Because while users are looking for not only of VR, they're also looking for some other interesting things. And the key component, the most important thing that happened is that those who haven't faced immersive technologies before are aware of them now. However, most likely they will not be using them later on a daily basis. But most importantly, now they know how it works, and it will be much easier for them to start using them more often in the nearest future. When the problem of big size of glasses will be solved, when ER will be in glasses, not on cell phones. So these are all evolutionary issues. And people will be more ready to use it on a daily basis to develop their skills. The skills needed in regular life. Ekaterina, could you please provide comments on AR? Do you know any other cases where applications demonstrated a sharp increase? Or do you have any questions to Andrei? I couldn't give you the example of the application that would demonstrate sharp growth within a few months, providing millions of new users. As for the question, current goals of the application is not only to teach people to draw, but it also development of creative skills. And so this leads me to the question, what do you do to keep your customers? As we see from other AR applications, usually user uploads the application and then deletes it. For example, in loyalty programs that retailers provide, they have a system which allows to keep the customer for 2-3 months by interaction with them. But this application is to last for years. What do you do to keep your customers for a long period? This is an excellent question, because now VR and AR alone is not enough to keep the customers for years. So the idea that Sketchar started with, it moved aside, and it now is bigger, because now we develop creativity, and VR is one of instruments, one of tools that allows to do this.
Я бы сейчас в ближайшие несколько лет
So within coming
не
few years,
рассматривал, наверное, продукты до полной виртуальной реальности как
I wouldn't talk
самостоятельные
about
такой
VR
технологии,
products
которые драйвит весь
as
продукт,
the
а
independent
все-таки
technologies
выстраивал
that drives
бы
the whole product.
целеполагание того, что хочется пользователю донести
But I would pay more attention about what we want to deliver to the user from viewpoint of technology.
Используйте до полной или виртуальную реальность, и вы будете
Not like use virtual reality and you will go to
все-таки
space.
целеполагание как раз для
No,
пользователя очень важно, и, вероятно,
it's
для разработчиков
very
до полной
important to
виртуальной
have
реальности
goals
это
for the
больно
consumers.
сказать, что или признаться себе то, что да,
And for
моя технология
developers, it is
не
quite hard to say that my technology
возврата
is not the
пользователя
driver
одна из
of
составляющих
maintaining customers for a long time, but just is one of component of general experience of
Золотые слова,
creativity.
квинтэссенцию, которую можно выносить в итоге
Wow,
сессии.
so nicely put.
Андрей, спасибо большое.
Andrei,
Нам,
thank you very
прилетели
much.
вопросы.
So we
Некоторые
have
из
received
тех,
some
которые еще,
questions
которые были заданы к тем, кто уже выступал, например, к Чарли.
that were asked
Чарли,
to
вопрос
Charlie, for
от
example.
Надежды Куковякиной.
Nadezhda Koryakin is asking you, do you think the AR market is eternal? How did pandemic affect the market of AR/VR? Are there any points of growth that could be sold to investors? Is anything being sold to investors during pandemic?
Well, I think fundraising has pace in the VR and AR market. It does not appear to have been. I mean, for the first couple of months, of course, nobody understood what was happening. But now that we are in this sort of new normal, technology companies, and in particular, AR and VR technology companies are doing well at the moment, as are, frankly, any technologies that have to do with us sitting in front of a screen, including our smartphones. Let me say this about AR, because I think it is widely misunderstood. There are really two flavors of augmented reality, or three, as I think about them. One is mobile AR, right? The camera-first use of your smartphone, the world mediated through the camera. That is the basis of Snapchat, which is a very fast-growing and successful company. They are a camera-first company. Facebook, Instagram, these are camera-first companies. That is the definition of augmented reality, combining inside of the camera the digital and the physical. So, consumer augmented reality is alive and well in your smartphone, and it's being integrated into apps we use every day, like Google Maps, which now, if you haven't used it, has a fantastic computer vision built off of Google Maps, combining it with geolocation, so that now, in addition to knowing exactly where you are, it knows which direction you're looking in, thanks to AR technology. Now, that's not something people need to know. We don't walk around saying, oh my God, Google Maps has AR. No, we say Google Maps got better, right? So AR is bleeding into lots of things we use every day without people calling it augmented reality, nor should they, right? I mean, technology, when it succeeds, is invisible to us. So I think one of the ways that we can tell how early it is, right, is that we're still talking about it like it's really special. Now, the other genre of augmented reality, which is head-mounted displays, right, seeing through actual physical glasses, that technology is not ready for consumers. Apple has not even launched a technology. Everything that is out there for a consumer to wear on their head is an interim device, an experimental device that are made in very small quantities by companies that are trying to figure it out, trying to see if there's a market. Can they get in there early, like Nreal for Android phones, as spatial computing glasses for Android phones that are $500. They were just launched in Korea and should be launched in the US perhaps this fall. Those are computer, and those are head-mounted displays for AR. So that's how people commonly think of AR, right? It's like the Magic Leap giant glasses or the HoloLens.
Это очки до полной реальности, в России говорят так.
I'm sorry?
AR glasses, yeah.
Yes, these are VR glasses. This is how we call them in Russia.
Прошу прощения, что перебил.
Okay, so the AR glasses, they're not really for consumers. They're being used in industry, right? There are lots of applications, both in medicine and in manufacturing. You see it used all over inside of industry today, as well as lots of other, body-worn devices, wrist scanners, and other technologies. These are becoming increasingly commonplace in industry, but they're not ready for consumers just yet. As I said, Apple is still probably several years away from doing its first initial take on AR glasses, and they may not even seem like heavy computing to people. They may be just a version of the glasses I wear today, but made much better with retinal scanning technology and some basic artificial intelligence, so that using that retinal scanning technology and it knows where I am and what I'm doing. And so it's not like a photosensitive lens that just adjusts whether you're indoor or outdoor, but it'll adjust to the time of day and the activity, the kind of light you have, and what you happen to be doing. Are you reading in a low light situation? Are you driving in or are you driving in the dark? Are you driving in the city or are you driving in the country? So those glasses may not even initially do a lot of computing as we understand it, but they could affect our lives in a dramatic way.
Thank you, Charlie. Yes, there are a lot of scenarios, but in brief, in one word, what are three most popular investment ideas or areas stepped up thanks to pandemic, such as investment in spatial?
Well, I think there are a number of areas. The world is becoming increasingly spatial and increasingly three-dimensional. Certainly the media we consume will be increasingly spatial. So, volumetric capture technology is something that you're seeing more and more. The thing that drives most media is communications, right? The reason we check our smartphones every day is because it connects us to other people. So you could easily see an application like teleport driving AR glasses. That is, I have a LiDAR scanner, a volumetric capture camera sitting on my desk. And as a result of that, you have one sitting on your desk. And as a result of that, if we're both wearing AR glasses, we could be virtually present in each other's physical spaces. So I think there's a tremendous opportunity there. And indeed, you see companies like Zoom and Microsoft are working on that, because that is a future killer application for that kind of a display technology.
Спасибо. То есть коммуникационные инструменты для журналистов, а в скором времени у нас еще будут.
So we talk about these tools for media, and we'll have these tools in our phones, so we can have these maps. Well, it is a great thing. You will continue. We have already mentioned the way we work with developers. I would like to provide a few comments, but first of all, Ekaterina, can you provide us an overview of the market? So now what is the difference? When we talk about developers, what has changed? Do we see something new because of COVID-19? You are a part of this association. Can you share your ideas? I can start with some bad aspects. Before we talked about this industry, and we've mentioned that, well, we needed to have some breakthrough. We had these expectations about this market, but this year, because of this lockdown, this industry, it's not so active as it was before. So, for example, in spring, it was really a bad period. Because we usually talk about events, visualization projects. We attract people, users, when we have different events, and it is what was not actual and relevant because, unfortunately, this lockdown affected it. And only in the end of August, we had this demand for such tools, for VR and AR solutions. And I would like to know that during spring, when we talk about our clients, they stopped piloting different projects because they had financial issues. And then they stopped implementing new projects. We talk about museums and public spaces. And they didn't want to use this technology. They postponed it because, for example, different parks, they wanted to have these technologies, but right now they don't want it. They want just to be parks with flowers. Just usual parks. But now we have this new demands. Companies are more active, they participate in different procurement activities. But now we offer lower prices because companies, they are not as strong as they were before COVID-19. And now market is not as strong as we had it before. And now we need to analyze the market because during spring, during summer, some of the top specialists, they changed their specialization. They started to work more with AI because they needed money. But from other points of view, this situation led to the understanding, and now we understand where these technologies can really help. It's not only about people who work in this industry. We have society, and they needed new tools. When we closed schools, when we stopped events, so people, they asked us, okay, you are in this VR industry, so what can you offer for us? So we had this request. We needed conferences, we needed new events, but online events. So we saw that there was a demand for new solutions. Sure, we have requirements and people, they want to have high quality solutions. But now when we talk about technologies, they do not allow us to provide a very high-tech solutions. We need to have high-end devices for it. And we need to have special laptops, special headsets for it. And not so many people have such devices. And it's not only about Russia, it's about different countries. But when we talk about regular consumers, they do understand that these technologies allow them to travel, to communicate with their friends. We have events in the AR space and VR space. Well, for example, before, VR was considered just as a place for the youth, so they tried to have games in this space. But here, during the summer, we had festival, and we had our Russian artist, Denis Semyonov. He created interactive space in VR, and people could travel using these headsets, and they could communicate. If we talk about different formats, now we talk about games, and they use different tools for it. They create content with these devices. Well, for example, the conference that was organized by Sber company, and it took place a few weeks ago, they applied different tools. They created this conference. They used VR, AR, and they showed different content. And it was for the mass audience. We have these platforms for games. We can carry out different events. We can participate using our mobile devices or laptops. These are solutions which are simpler, and it's not what can be produced by huge companies, but different studios, different small companies, they can be creative, they can use these platforms, they can provide you with these tools. They have some sessions, they have some exhibitions, or it can be an interactive show with Zoom, but you can also connect to separate platforms, and users, they are more involved in this space and they do understand better why they need this. But for a business, for example, these cases that were typical and these cases were effective, for example, remote assistance at industrial enterprises, it was quite useful because we could save financial resources. We didn't need employees traveling to these facilities. So now you have this remote assistant, and actually you just pay for the time they spent. When we closed these borders and it was impossible to travel, it actually allowed companies to stay active and to be active.
Простите, пожалуйста.
Well, excuse me, yes, I will tell just a few words about this, about assistance. Well, we have one question from the chat. And one of the spheres I'm interested in, this is education. There is a demand for interactive technologies. And we need to understand that these platforms where teachers and students communicate, we need new tools. Our teachers, they could show something in classes, but now we have digital platforms. One question to you. Do you have any research the way AR, VR affect people, their behavior? How do we consider these technologies? Do you know anything about this research, or where we can find this research? How AR and VR affect our brains also? Well, I think that we have lots of international institutions and they produce different reports, but I cannot tell right now any specific report. We would like to know that now, this year, if we don't have schools closed, we have one center and they test different programs, they test educational content, so we can look and visit their website. Well, we would like to continue. We talk a few words about remote assistance, advantages, disadvantages, but let's talk about businesses and different big corporations. Well, if they're involved in advanced technologies, we talk about AR, VR. This is very advanced. So how these companies survive during COVID-19? Have they changed their behavior in these circumstances? Please, Vladimir. Yes, Alexei, thank you, dear colleagues. Hello, good afternoon. Well, you were right. One of the best drivers that we used, it's called remote assistant. This is a team viewer for people, and it is the most effective tool that we used. First of all, if you consider economic effects, Ekaterina was right. We can lower travel costs. You don't need to install specific devices at these facilities. So now we have the solutions, and you can help them with AR. We use remote assistant, and they have these AR functions.
некий видеокол, да,
Currently, it can be a video call with
Если
additional
возвращаться
functions.
к тематике выступления, да, мы же все-таки
Well, let's talk again about the technologies that are in place now and why we didn't have such disruptive development. I can talk about industries. Well, initially, we had very high expectations, and we actually cannot understand why they wanted to see this rapid growth, explosive growth. But when we don't have people in this process, when we talk about industries, well, then we don't need AR, VR, because usually when we talk about safety, training, we need people to be present. We need people to be present in classes. So, well, if we have robots who replace people, then we don't need AR, VR. But when we talk about robotics, we can have some tests with AR, with VR. We have such projects where we can test it. We can control their work with their tools with AR, but it is for the future, for the nearest 5 years, we believe so. We have a problem because VR, it is usually placed in facilities, and we don't have mobile devices that can help employees from huge companies to work remotely, for example. First of all, we have problems with equipment, with software. We need specific functions. So there are some problems with the infrastructure that we have. It is really difficult to use this AR remotely sometimes, because when we talk about big industrial facilities, it is easier to place it there. But when you want to download something when you're at home, it's quite a challenge. But what do you think will be the most suitable solution in the future when we talk about AR, VR? I think that trainings will be very popular with AR, VR. We can see the effects from this. We see economic effects, and we can see that we can provide a high quality training materials. When we talk about long-term development, we can say that it will be also popular. But as I view it, for example, AR, we need to create some headsets that will allow users to work remotely, to create a workplace. So from your laptop, you can have different software that can be downloaded to those headsets, and you have this interaction between devices. So we need to have this connection of different devices. And then it can be even better than classical devices. So we have such a workplace, right? So you will be working in the headsets, right? And you'll have access to different platforms. For education platforms, you'll have remote assistant, right, with this headset. Yes, sometimes, for example, when we talk about warehouses, you need navigation, or maybe you will have additional assistance. For example, when you need to receive specific products, when you need to analyze some patterns which are difficult, maybe we can have computing vision, and 5G maybe can help us. Vladimir, thank you. I urge all startups who are right now watching this conference, maybe you have right now some ideas for these industries, and we can continue. Well, unfortunately, we don't have lots of time. Sasha Kichov, can you please tell us? I know that you are part of the projects
делают такую вот большую ставку, как говорит Владимир, на индустриальный кейс.
And you don't talk about industrial cases. What is your focus?
Про то, куда могли бы разворачиваться компании.
So, what is the direction of development? Hello, dear colleagues. I would like to tell a few words. We don't have any alternatives that we need to follow urgently. I would like to know that I'm at the company and our previous focus was on industries, and we had some cases. We provided educational programs to increase skills of specific employees. Well, some of the cases were successful before COVID-19. For example, when we talk about Walmart and they purchased lots of headsets, they provided training for linear personnel to increase their skills. It was quite successful, and lots of companies, they realized that this is the right direction of work, that we can offer services in this sphere. But during the COVID-19, we have a different situation, because you need to provide support to medical workers, for example. We have this issue when lots of specialists, they are occupied, and you can have VR tools which can be this driver to enhance some of the skills. These tools also provide training, especially during COVID-19, when we have this difficult situation and lots of people, healthcare workers, they are depressed. These VR tools actually help them to upgrade their skills. When we talk about industries and such huge players as Gazprom Neft, Sibur, we have AR headsets. It's not about glasses because it is a complex device. We had remote assistance. It was introduced by Lanit company. They provided systems to different hospitals. So these tools, they helped at ICU units. They recommended how to use specific devices. So it is really important to have the safe tools, and we need to have healthcare workers to be safe. It was a relevant topic, and this remote assistance, which was used in industries, now it is viewed as something different, and it has actually helped high-skilled professionals. They could manage all the processes. So they were ready to provide help, and these people who needed skills, they had the support devices. I talk with different companies, and they have location-based VR. They also want to have educational programs. They want to have content for their companies. We talk about key industries, and they feel that there is a lack of content. It's not about education. It's about different aspects and different sectors. Also, when we talk about games, we also need to improve this field. AR and VR, these are the tools, and if you use them correctly, then you have lots of benefits. Well, thank you. When we talk about tools, I would like to ask Vitaly Stepanov, can you please tell about tools?
Vitaly, we have a question for you. How are you going through pandemic as the developer of the Irene system? What has changed in your company? How do instruments migrate? We heard about others. What about instruments? We had a wonderful experience during pandemic. I have noted for myself a long time ago that all colleagues involved in VR, it is a pleasure to work with them because the mind is extremely flexible. and they're always ready for such challenges. Colleagues have already said that the initial reaction was to reconsider everything. And yes, there was this swamp in spring. Well, all affected industries, only industries were affected because everything went online. So museum and expositions, they came to VR people because they said that, oh, it's becoming so obvious now. And then after analyzing all technical details, it turned out that it's not that easy, it's not that fast. And it turned out that the affected industries came to us. So people who had no money came to us, such as cinemas, for example. And for them, VR was a silver bullet that would solve all problems. So it is still being discussed, but it's obvious that it's not that easy, but it made a team to turn from one flow to a different target audience and start working with it. And we had no pre-made solutions for this. So some resources had to be directed there. And such people like large companies as Gazpromneft, who were in the package, we have hold projected. And as Vladimir said, their resources froze. We saw that use of budget stops, and companies stopped investing into innovations as actively as they did 6 months before. So we had to generate new ideas, to find new entry points. And education was a nice discovery for us, because we received requests from schools, from colleges. They said they want to try VR. Please give us content. What can we do? We had an interesting experiment with colleagues from DFU. We had an event for pupils. What was the most amazing project you were involved in during that process? There was 3 people who won, and for the first we had a fight inside the team because we were saying that we need 2 third places. So the finals, the guys who won the finalists, these were the guys from physics, geography, physical exercises. They made the application within 2 weeks. Another project that amazed us where pupils created quests. In a dead house where the reason of death needed to be identified. So the conclusion is that you were betting on offline business in the beginning of pandemic, but later you realized that the cases are too complicated and there are not enough money in that area from the consumers. You realized that you started working with the e-education, in e-learning. Yes, it's mainstream right now, and we had to give technology to them. Do we have time for more questions and answers? And now we don't have time. So, all those who have asked their question, please write your question to the participants. Install the application SketchR. Find the Charlie Fink and all his publications. They're very interesting, especially the Forbes. Please go to the laboratory of Vladimir and use the gas station of Gazprom. Ask for a recommendation of Alexander. Join Association of AR and try VR instrument. Become Skolkovo resident if you're a startup, and go to VR Capsule in Portal Tech if you are here today, or if you visit Tech Park later. So please go to showroom and test virtual reality. And stay on the brink. Thank you for being with us. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.
развитие интернета вещей и искусственного интеллекта породило колоссальный объем генерируемых данных, использование которых привело к появлению принципиально новых продуктов и сервисов и кардинально изменило структуру всей мировой промышленности. Концепция Connected Industries предусматривает полный производственный редизайн. Для ее реализации государство и частный бизнес соединяют свои усилия и взаимодействуют со всем международным сообществом.
Хочу быть на высоте и в космосе.
Супер, отличный дубль.
И на Земле. Особый минеральный состав Акваминерале дает мне жизненные силы и на большие дела, и на маленькие радости. Акваминерале наполняет жизнью.
Занимайтесь делом жизни, а остальное доверьте профессионалам. С сервисом Hyundai Mobility вы получаете новый автомобиль на год, а техническое обслуживание и страхование берет на себя компания. Hyundai Mobility – сервис подписки на автомобиль. Скачайте приложение.
Инвестиционная конференция «Промышленные перспективы Москвы». Вы готовы изменить мир? Конференция – это площадка обмена мнениями, поиска трендов, встречи с единомышленниками, партнерами и лучшими отраслевыми экспертами в России. Условием успеха стали инновации, международное сотрудничество, участие в государственных программах поддержки. Мы делимся своими знаниями, достижениями, ищем возможности для сотрудничества со всеми регионами России. Развиваем международные научно-технические и инвестиционные проекты. Огромный бизнес-потенциал московского региона, инфраструктура бизнеса и инноваций, научные и кадровые ресурсы должны служить нам и всей России. Инвестиционная конференция «Промышленные перспективы Москвы». Вы готовы изменить мир?